Snow fell heavy from the broken sky. The ruins of the city were silent except for the cold wind moving through empty buildings. The war had ended here long ago, but for the ones left behind, the battle was still alive. She stood in the snow with her child pressed to her chest. Her name was Lyra, once a wife, now a widow. The girl in her arms was no more than 5 years old, her tiny feet bare, purple from the biting cold. Every breath that came from the child was a weak cloud, fading quickly into the frozen air. Lyra had begged before many times. She had lowered her head to soldiers, to strangers, to anyone who carried food. They ignored her, or they laughed, or they pushed her away. No one cared for a widow of her kind. She was alien to them, nothing but dirt on their boots. But tonight she could no longer hide her shame. Her daughter's lips were turning blue. Her daughter's fingers shook and her eyes grew heavy with sleep. Sleep in this cold was death. Lyra could not watch her child die. Footsteps echoed on the broken street. A human soldier walked slowly, his gun hanging from his back. His uniform was torn, but his eyes were sharp. He looked tired, like someone who had walked through too many graves. Lyra stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Just one hot meal for my daughter," she whispered, her words shaking in the air. She swallowed her pride, lowered her eyes, and added, "I'll be yours tonight." The words burned her throat, but she spoke them. For her child's sake, she would give anything, even the last of her dignity. The soldier froze. He looked at her, at the child, at the purple feet half buried in snow. For a long time he said nothing. The cold wind howled between them, carrying silence heavier than war. Then, slowly, he took off his gloves. He knelt down before the child, his breath clouding in the frozen night. Without a word, he reached into his pack and pulled out something small, wrapped in cloth. Steam rose as he opened it, the smell of food spreading like a miracle through the air. The child's eyes lit up with weak hope. Lyra stared, unable to believe what she saw. No bargain, no mocking laugh, no cruel demand. The soldier simply held out the food with quiet hands. "Eat," he said at last, his voice low. His eyes did not look like those of the others. There was no hunger for her body, no disgust for her alien face. Only something else. Something she had not seen in years, mercy. The child took the food with shaking hands. She bit into it and warmth returned to her cheeks for the first time in days. Lyra's own eyes filled with tears, but she did not move closer. She did not trust this. Kindness from a human was a weapon, always with a hidden blade. The soldier sat in the snow, watching the girl eat. His hands rested on his knees, empty, open. For a long time he stayed silent, his gaze distant. Lyra wondered what he saw. Perhaps ghosts, perhaps memories. The war had carved deep scars in every living being. At last he spoke. "No one should have to beg for a child's life," he said almost to himself. His voice carried both anger and sorrow. He looked at Lyra then, straight into her tired eyes. "I will not take what you offer," he continued. "I only give because I know what it means to lose." Lyra's heart twisted. What did he mean? Was this a trick? Her hands clutched her daughter close. She wanted to run, but her legs were weak. She wanted to believe, but belief was dangerous. The fire in the child's small body returned little by little. Her breathing grew stronger, her eyes brighter. She leaned against the soldier, too tired to fear him. Lyra watched, her chest heavy with confusion. Snow kept falling, covering their footprints. The world around them was nothing but white and broken stone. Yet in that ruin, something strange had happened. A human had stopped. A human had given. And for the first time since her husband's death, Lyra felt a spark, not of hope yet, but of doubt. Doubt that all humans were cruel. Doubt that mercy had died in this world. The soldier rose slowly, pulling his cloak tighter. "We should move," he said quietly. "Others will come, and they will not be like me." Lyra stared at him, silent. The food warmed her child, but the fear inside her heart did not fade. She did not know if this man was a savior or another form of danger. But as her daughter clung to him, as the tiny feet found strength to stand again, she understood one thing. She could not walk away. The wind roared through the ruins, carrying with it the sound of distant engines. The soldier looked over his shoulder, his hand brushing the weapon at his back. Danger was near. Lyra held her child tighter, her heart pounding. For the first time, she wondered. Why did this human stop when all the others walked past? And what price would come with his mercy? Night dropped heavy over the broken city. The ruins looked even more dangerous in darkness. The snow reflected the pale moon, but shadows were everywhere, hiding eyes, hiding hunger. The human soldier, Daniel, moved quickly through the empty streets, his cloak wrapped tight. Behind him followed Lyra, carrying her child. The girl's small head rested against her shoulder, her breath warm but weak. The sound of boots on snow echoed far too loud in this silent place. Daniel raised his hand, telling them to stop. He listened, his head turning slowly. Far above, strange lights crossed the sky, blinking, moving, hunting. They were not stars. They were patrol ships, searching for survivors, for prey. Lyra held her child close. Her heart, racing, she had hidden many times before, always waiting for soldiers to pass, but this night was different. This time a human led her, not hunted her. And that truth frightened her more than the cold. Daniel moved again, leading them to a dark shape in the snow. It was an old factory, its windows broken, its roof half gone. He pushed the heavy door, open, the sound scraping like thunder in the quiet street. Inside was black and silent, the air filled with the smell of rust and dust. "Stay close," Daniel whispered. His voice was low, calm, but sharp like steel. Lyra followed him, her feet crunching on broken glass. The child stirred weakly, whispering something in her alien tongue. Daniel looked back, his face unreadable, but his eyes softer when they met the little girl's. They reached the center of the factory, a wide floor littered with metal scraps. Daniel dropped his pack and knelt. From inside he pulled a small box. He pressed a button, and a thin spark lit up. Soon a tiny flame rose, eating at the scraps of wood and cloth he placed carefully. The fire came alive, warm and gentle. Orange light touched their faces. For the first time in weeks, Lyra felt heat against her skin. Her daughter opened her eyes wide, reaching her hands toward the glow. She smiled faintly, her small fingers trembling in the light. But Lyra's fear did not fade. Her eyes darted to the cracked windows, the open holes in the ceiling. "Fire will bring them," she whispered, her voice tight. "Smoke will call killers." Daniel's eyes stayed on the flame. "Without fire, she dies," he said, nodding at the child. "She needs heat more. Then we need to hide," Lyra wanted to argue. But the warmth on her skin silenced her. She sat beside the child, rubbing her frozen feet. Slowly, color began to return, the purple fading. For the first time that night, her daughter giggled softly. The sound weak but real. Daniel did not smile. He sat in silence, his hand resting near his weapon. His eyes scanned the shadows, his ears sharp. He did not trust the night. He had seen too much death come from quiet places. The factory groaned under the weight of snow. A metal beam cracked in the corner, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Lyra flinched, clutching her child tighter. Daniel stood at once, his eyes narrowing. "Someone is near," he whispered. Lyra's heart froze. She heard it too. The sound of boots, slow and heavy, outside the wall. The crunch of snow, the soft click of metal. Not machines, not ships, men. The fire crackled loudly, too loud. The smell of smoke filled the air, rising through the broken roof. Daniel's hand closed around his weapon. He motioned for silence. One finger over his lips, Lyra pressed her child's face into her shoulder, trying to silence her breathing. Her own chest hurt as she held her breath. The footsteps grew closer, circling the factory. A voice whispered outside, then another answered with a low laugh. The sound was cruel, hungry, not soldiers, scavengers. The door creaked suddenly. The wood groaned as someone pushed. Daniel raised his weapon, his eyes sharp as blades. The firelight flickered over his face, hard and ready. Lyra's heart pounded so loud she thought they would hear it. The door slammed open. 3 figures stepped inside, shadows against the orange glow. They were thin, ragged, armed with knives and broken guns. Their eyes shone with greed when they saw Lyra and the child. One of them licked his lips. Well, he hissed. A mother, a little one, and a soldier out of place. Daniel stepped forward, his weapon raised. Leave, he said flatly, his voice iron. The scavengers laughed, their teeth broken and yellow. We leave with food and... With them, one sneered, pointing at Lyra. Or maybe just the girl, she looks tender. Lyra's blood turned to ice, her arms wrapped tighter around her child. Fear clawed her chest, her eyes flicked to Daniel, waiting, praying. The scavengers moved closer, knives catching the firelight. Daniel did not step back. Instead, he lowered his stance, his eyes sharp, his finger steady on the trigger. The air between them grew heavy, every second stretched. The fire burned, the snow fell outside, the city held its breath. Lyra thought of running, but where? Outside waited the dark, the patrol ships, the endless cold. Here stood death in human shape, and between it all, one soldier who had not yet betrayed her. Her child whimpered softly. The scavenger closest to them grinned wider, stepping toward her. But before his foot touched the firelight, Daniel moved, faster than Lyra thought possible. The night exploded. The night cracked open with violence. The scavenger lunged forward, his knife flashing in the firelight. Daniel moved like a storm. His weapon rose, the sound of thunder filled the factory. The scavenger dropped, his knife clattering to the frozen floor, blood spreading dark across the snow-dusted concrete. The other 2 froze, their cruel grins twisting into shock. For a moment, silence returned, broken only by the crackle of fire. Then rage filled their faces. They screamed curses and rushed forward. Their boots slammed against the floor, their blades hungry for flesh. Lyra pressed her child against her chest, crawling back into the corner. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear nothing else. Her daughter whimpered, her small fingers clutching at Lyra's clothes. The mother's eyes locked on the human soldier, desperate and terrified. Daniel spun to meet the charge. The first scavenger swung a rusted blade, aiming for Daniel's throat. But Daniel stepped aside, grabbed the man's arm, twisted. A sharp crack echoed as the arm broke like dry wood. The man screamed, his weapon falling useless to the ground. The second came from behind, his knife raised. Hi, Lyra gasped, but Daniel was faster. He slammed his elbow back, hitting the attacker's face. Bone crunched, blood sprayed, the knife fell. Daniel spun, his weapon now in both hands, ready to strike again. The scavengers stumbled, broken, and bleeding. They looked at him with fear now, the firelight showing a soldier not of mercy but of steel. Daniel's eyes were cold. He had fought men like these before. He knew their hunger, their cruelty, their joy and weakness. To him, they were shadows of the war that never ended. One tried to crawl away, dragging his broken arm. Daniel stepped forward, his weapon pointed. The man begged, his voice cracking. Mercy, please, But Daniel fired once more. The echo rang through the empty factory. Then silence swallowed it. Smoke curled above the fire. The bodies lay still, their shadows long against the wall. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly, his chest rising and falling. His face remained calm, but his hands shook faintly, the past burning through his veins. Lyra stared at him, her breath sharp, her body trembling. She had expected him to help, maybe even fight a little, but what she saw was more than survival. It was skill, brutal and precise. This was not just a soldier, this was a man shaped by endless battles, a man who carried war in his blood. The fire flickered across his face, showing scars cut deep into his skin. Not all from blades, not all from guns. Some were old, carved by pain and time. She wondered what kind of human fought. Like that, what had broken him to turn him into this? The child, half asleep in her arms, whispered softly, "Warm one." The word struck Daniel, though he did not show it. He turned away from Lyra's eyes, crouched near the fire, and began reloading his weapon with slow, careful movements. Lyra's voice finally broke the silence. "You saved us," she whispered. Her voice shook between gratitude and fear. "But why?" Daniel did not answer at first. He stared into the fire, the flames dancing in his tired eyes. When he finally spoke, his words were low, almost to himself. "Because no one saved mine." Lyra frowned, confused, but she did not ask more. She saw the weight in his face, the heaviness of memory, a pain too sharp to touch. She only held her daughter tighter, her own chest filled with questions she dared not speak. The night outside grew louder. Engines roared in the distance. Searchlights swept across ruined streets. The bodies on the floor would draw others. Daniel knew it, his sharp eyes already fixed on the doors and broken windows. "They will come," he said, his tone flat. "We cannot stay here." Lyra stood slowly, her legs weak, her arms stiff from holding her child. The fire's warmth was hard to leave, but the look in Daniel's eyes left no choice. He had saved them from shadows, but greater shadows were still moving outside. They left the fire behind, the smoke rising into the frozen night like a beacon. The cold bit their skin again, harsher now after tasting warmth. Daniel led the way, his steps quick. His weapon ready, Lyra followed, clutching her daughter close, her heart torn between fear of the world outside and fear of the man who walked before her. Snow crunched under their feet. The silence of the city felt thinner now, broken by distant shouts, faint lights, the echo of war not yet gone. Every corner could hide an enemy. Every shadow could hold death. And yet the only question that burned in Lyra's mind was not about the danger outside. It was about the human soldier. Why would he fight so fiercely for a widow and her child? Why risk himself for lives that meant nothing to others? The cold wind whipped her face, carrying voices from far away. She looked at Daniel's back, strong and steady. And for the first time since the war began, she wondered, was this man a savior? Or was he a shadow even darker than the ones he fought? The tunnels were narrow and black. Daniel guided them with careful steps, his hand always near. His weapon, the air smelled of rust, ash, and old blood. Water dripped from broken pipes, each drop echoing like a clock counting down. Lyra followed, carrying her daughter close. The girl had fallen into shallow sleep, her breath slow but steady. Every time, her small body stirred. Fear stabbed Lyra's heart, but warmth still lingered in the child's skin, proof that fire and food had saved her. They walked deeper. The light above faded until only darkness wrapped around them. Daniel finally stopped, setting down his pack. "We rest here," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight that was both command and care. Lyra sank against the wall, exhausted. Her arms shook from holding her daughter so long, her eyes stayed fixed on Daniel. She still could not understand him. Why a human soldier would risk his life for her child. Why he fought scavengers like demons from his past. Daniel sat opposite her, pulling a small kit from his pack. When he rolled up his sleeve, Lyra's eyes widened. Blood stained the cloth, running down his arm. A deep cut stretched across his flesh, dark and ugly. "You are wounded," she whispered. Her voice cracked with both shock and guilt. She had not even seen him bleed during the fight. Her mind had been trapped only on survival. Daniel said nothing. He took a strip of cloth, pressing it to the wound, but his hand trembled, his face pale from blood loss. Lyra hesitated, then forced herself to move closer. "Let me," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. Daniel looked at her with cold suspicion. For a moment she thought he would refuse, but then his eyes softened just slightly, and he gave her the cloth. She pressed it against his arm, her hand steady, though her heart raced, as she cleaned the wound. Her fingers brushed against his skin. She saw scars, not one but many, some small and faded, others deep and cruel. Across his arm, his shoulder, his chest, his body was a map of violence. These were not the marks of one battle. These were the marks of a man who had lived. Through endless war, her breath caught. "What happened to you?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Daniel's eyes darkened. For a long time he said nothing, the silence stretching heavy. Then his voice broke it, low and rough. "I once had a daughter," he said. Lyra froze, her hands pausing on his wound. Daniel's gaze fell to the cold floor. She was small like yours, her hair golden, her laugh brighter than any fire. His voice cracked, though his face stayed hard. "When the winter came, I could not feed her. The soldiers kept food for themselves. They said mercy was weakness. I begged, I fought, I stole, but in the end, all I had was my arms to hold her. And in those arms, she grew cold. Her breath slowed. Her little feet turned purple from the frost, just like yours would have tonight." Lyra's chest tightened. Her throat ached with pain she did not expect. She saw him now, not only as a soldier, but as a father who had lost everything. Her eyes burned with tears, but she held them back. Daniel continued, his voice like broken stone. "When I buried her, I swore I would never let it happen again. But war does not give choices. So I kept fighting. Not for victory, not for glory, only to make sure no other child died with frozen feet if I could stop it." The silence after his words was deep. Only the dripping water dared to speak. Lyra looked at him, her heart torn between fear and something new. Respect. For the first time since she had met him, she believed this man was not here to harm her. He was here because pain had shaped him into something else, a shield made of sorrow. Her daughter stirred. Murmuring softly in her sleep, Daniel's eyes flicked toward the child, a shadow of grief passing over his face. He closed his eyes briefly, then looked away. "I will get you through this," he said quietly. "Even if it kills me." Lyra wanted to speak, but before her lips could form words, a sound echoed through the tunnel. A deep wail, metallic and sharp, the scream of sirens. Her blood froze. Daniel stood at once, his weapon back in his hands. "They are searching," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "They will come for us." Lyra pressed her child tighter to her chest, her heart thundering. The shadows around them grew darker. The sound of boots faint in the distance. She met Daniel's eyes once more. She no longer doubted his promise, but doubt burned in her still. Would his past save them or destroy them? The tunnel shook with the sound of sirens. Red lights blinked faintly in the cracks above, searching, hunting. Daniel's face grew hard, his eyes sharp like knives. "They are close," he whispered. "Too close." Lyra clutched her daughter, her arms tight, her heart racing. The child stirred, her weak voice mumbling in sleep. Lyra pressed a kiss to her forehead, whispering comfort that even she did not believe. Her breath came fast, her legs trembling, but she followed Daniel without question. The tunnels twisted like veins under the city. Rusty pipes ran along the walls, dripping icy water. The ground was wet, slippery, covered in old bones and trash. The air grew heavier with smoke. Somewhere above them, buildings still burned. The war had left fire that never fully died. Daniel led with steady steps, his weapon ready. His ears caught every echo, every shift of stone. He moved like a man who had walked through death many times. Behind him, Lyra followed, the firelight of memory in her mind. The way he had spoken of his lost daughter, the way his voice cracked though his face stayed steel. She did not know why, but she trusted his path even through darkness. Suddenly, a beam of light cut through the tunnel. Voices shouted in the distance, sharp and angry. Lyra froze, holding her child closer, but Daniel pulled her down behind a pile of broken stone. "Stay low," he whispered, his hand steady on her shoulder. Through the cracks, Lyra saw shadows move, soldiers with helmets, their guns glowing faintly in the dark. Their boots echoed on the wet stone. They swept their lights across the walls, hunting like wolves. One beam slid past her face. Her breath caught, but Daniel's hand pressed her down, keeping her still. The soldiers passed slowly, their voices cold. "Tracks here," one said, his tone cruel. "They won't get far," another replied. The group moved forward, the sound of metal scraping against metal as they reloaded their weapons. Daniel waited until the echoes faded. Then he rose, pulling. Lyra gently by the arm. "We must move faster," he said. "There is an exit ahead, but it will not be safe." They hurried through the tunnel. The child whimpered softly, her small hand clutching Lyra's hair. Lyra whispered back, "Quiet. My star, quiet." Her voice broke, but the girl listened, burying her face into her mother's shoulder. The tunnel sloped upward. A faint glow spilled down from above, pale and broken. Daniel slowed, raising his hand to signal silence. He climbed carefully, peering over the edge. The ruined street stretched out, filled with snow and ash. Searchlights cut across the ruins, moving in wide arcs. Engines growled in the distance, the sound of armored vehicles. Daniel turned back, his face grim. "They have blocked the city," he whispered. "If we go out, we walk into their jaws." Lyra's throat tightened. "Then where?" she asked, her voice shaking. Daniel looked past her, his eyes cold fire. "We go through them." Her heart stopped. She wanted to scream that it was madness, but his eyes held no doubt. And when she looked at her daughter, shivering and pale, she knew there was no choice. Death waited both ahead and behind. Better to run through fire than freeze in silence. Daniel climbed out first, pulling his cloak tighter. He scanned the street, then reached down, offering his hand. Lyra hesitated only a moment, then placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, the grip of someone who would not let go. Snow bit their faces as they stepped into the open. The city stretched wide, broken buildings glowing with faint red from distant flames. The air stank of smoke and metal. Searchlights swept, and every sweep threatened to expose them. Daniel moved fast, keeping to the shadows. He led them across rubble, broken walls, shattered glass. Each step was a risk, each breath a prayer. Lyra's chest ached from fear. Her child's small weight dragged at her arms, but she did not falter, not while Daniel moved ahead like a hunter. Suddenly, a shout tore through the night. Soldier spotted them, his voice harsh and sharp. "Here, they are here." Lights snapped onto their figures, bright and blinding. Engines roared, guns clicked into place. Lyra's heart stopped. She froze, clutching her daughter. But Daniel did not freeze. "Run!" he shouted, his voice like thunder. Gunfire cracked. Sparks flew as bullets struck stone. Daniel returned fire, his movements fast, brutal. He did not shoot wildly. Each shot was precise. Each shot bought them a second more of life. "Go!" he shouted again, pushing Lyra forward. Her legs moved without thought, carrying her child across rubble. Her breath burned, her body shook. But she ran, because behind her the human soldier stood like a wall of iron. Explosions shook the street. Fire rose into the sky. The city became a storm of smoke and flame. Lyra stumbled, nearly falling, but strong arms caught her. Daniel pulled her up, his face bloodied but unbroken. "We're not finished yet," he said, his voice low. "Keep moving." They darted into another broken building. The gunfire outside faded, though voices still shouted. Lyra's chest heaved, her arms numb, her child clinging to her like a shadow. She turned to Daniel, her voice trembling. "They will never stop." Daniel's eyes met hers, steady, unshaken. "Then neither will I," he said. The fire of battle still burned in his gaze, but under it was something deeper. A vow, a promise forged from pain. Lyra felt it in her bones. This man would fight until his last breath to protect her child. And for the first time, her fear began to shift into something else. Not trust yet, not hope, but the first spark of belief. Outside, the city roared with searchlights and fire. The enemy hunted closer, their shadows stretching long against the ruins. The road ahead was death, but the only path left was forward. And together, through fire and darkness, they would walk it. The ruins groaned under the weight of the night. Smoke curled across the shattered streets, hiding shadows and enemies alike. Daniel pressed his back against a cracked wall, his weapon clutched tight. Lyra crouched nearby, her daughter clinging to her chest, the child's eyes wide with silent fear. The sound of boots echoed closer. Soldiers shouted orders, their voices bouncing through the ruins. Engines rumbled, the ground trembling with each step of the armored machines. They were surrounded. The tunnel was gone. The buildings were falling apart. There was nowhere left to run. Daniel's face hardened. His jaw set like stone. He glanced at Lyra, then at the girl in her arms. The fire in his eyes grew darker. He had walked this path before. He had seen this trap, and he knew only one way through. "They are too many," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. Her eyes darted to Daniel, desperate. "What do we do? How do we live?" Daniel inhaled slowly, steadying himself. "You live because I stay," he said quietly. His words cut through the air like a blade. "I will hold them here. You take her and run." Lyra's chest tightened. Her heart thrashed against her ribs. "No," she said sharply, shaking her head. "You saved us. You brought us this far. I will not leave you to die." Daniel's gaze stayed firm. "This is not about me," he said. "This is about her." His eyes flicked toward the little girl, who stared at him with innocent, trembling eyes. "She has a chance at life, at something better, but only if you go now." Tears filled Lyra's eyes. Her throat burned, her voice broke. "You speak like a man who has already given up," she said. "You cannot ask me to run while you fall." Daniel stepped closer, his voice low, urgent. "This is the only way," he insisted. "I know their tactics. I know how to slow them. I will draw them to me. Make them believe you are gone. When they follow my fire, you move through the ruins, find the old road, follow it to the forest." Lyra shook her head again. Her hands clutched her daughter tighter. Her chest filled with fury and grief. "You think I will let the only human who cared die alone? You think my child should live knowing the man who saved her was left behind?" Daniel's eyes flickered with something rare, a shadow of pain, a spark of sorrow. "I already lost one daughter," he said. "I will not lose another. If my life can buy her warmth, then it is worth it." Lyra's tears fell, hot even in the frozen night. Her breath shook, her body trembling between choice and despair. But deep inside she saw his truth, the scars on his body, the fire in his soul. This was not a man who sought life for himself. This was a man who only lived to shield others from death. The boots outside grew louder, closer. The ground shook with the weight of armored steps. Shouts echoed through the night. The soldiers were almost upon them. Daniel pulled a small device from his pack. It was a charge, rough and deadly, built to tear walls apart. He set it against the crumbling stone, his fingers working fast. Lyra's breath caught as she realized his plan. "You will bring the building down," she whispered. Daniel nodded once. "The collapse will slow them. Maybe bury some. It will give you time." She wanted to scream, to rip the device from his hands, but her daughter whimpered softly, her small voice breaking through the chaos. "Warm one," she whispered, reaching her tiny hand toward Daniel. Daniel froze, his hardened face softening for only a heartbeat. He touched her small fingers gently, then pulled away. His jaw clenched again. "You must go," he said, his voice rough. Now, Lyra's soul screamed. Her body shook with rage and grief, but her legs moved because she knew he was right. She turned toward the narrow alley on the far side, the only path not yet blocked. Her eyes locked on Daniel, one last time, his figure strong, unbroken, standing in the glow of fire and smoke. The soldiers' shouts grew louder, their lights cutting through the dark. Daniel pulled his weapon close, his eyes burning with fury. He stood tall, ready to become the storm. Lyra ran, tears streaming, her child pressed close. Behind her, the sound of the world breaking filled the night. The ground shook as the charge exploded. Stone screamed, walls collapsed, fire roared. The city shook under the weight of destruction. The soldiers shouted in panic, their voices lost in the thunder. Lyra stumbled but did not stop. Her breath tore through her chest, her body trembling. She dared not look back, but in her heart she carried his shadow. The soldier who stood for them, the man who became fire to buy their lives. The ruins behind her burned. The road ahead stretched into darkness. Her child whimpered softly, her little hands clutching tightly. Lyra kissed her forehead, whispering through tears. He is not gone. He walks with us still. And as she moved into the night, she swore that if he fell, his sacrifice would not be forgotten. Not by her, not by her daughter, not by the world. The ruins still burned behind them. Ash floated through the air like black snow. The ground trembled as walls collapsed, swallowing soldiers in dust and fire. Lyra kept running, her daughter clutched tight, her lungs burning with every breath. The alley opened into an empty street. Snow covered the stones, hiding blood, hiding bones. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant roar of flames. She stopped at last, her body shaking, her legs weak. She turned her eyes wide with dread. Was Daniel gone, buried under the rubble? Her heart screamed. She wanted to believe he lived, but the explosion had been too close. No man could survive that. Her tears fell hot against her frozen skin. Her daughter stirred, whispering softly, "Warm one." The word tore through Lyra's chest like a knife. Then a shadow moved in the smoke. A figure stumbled forward, bloodied, broken, but alive. Daniel. His cloak was torn, his face cut, his arm dripping red, but his eyes still burned with fire. He had not fallen, he had walked through the collapse and returned. Lyra gasped, her tears now mixed with shock and relief. She wanted to run to him, to hold him, but her legs were frozen, her heart trapped between despair and hope. Daniel reached them, his steps slow, heavy. He looked at the child first, his eyes softening as they always did. Then he looked at Lyra, and for the first time his lips curved into the smallest shadow of a smile. "I told you," he whispered, his voice rough. "I would not let her fall." Before Lyra could speak, the roar of engines broke the moment. Searchlights swept across the ruins, brighter and stronger. The enemy had not stopped. The explosion had slowed them but not destroyed them. More soldiers poured into the streets, armored, armed, merciless. Daniel's body swayed, weak from blood loss. But he stood straight, raising his weapon again. His eyes met Lyra's, firm and unyielding. "We move," he said, his voice carrying strength beyond his wounds. "They will not stop, so neither. Do we?" Lyra nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Her legs found strength again. Together they moved through the ruins, Daniel leading, Lyra behind with her daughter. Every corner was danger, every shadow a hunter. But Daniel's presence cut through fear like a blade. They reached the edge of the city. The forest lay ahead, black and endless. Its trees stretched like dark spears against the night sky. Between them and safety stood a line of soldiers. Their weapons glowed, their searchlights sliced through the snow. Lyra's heart sank. She whispered, "There is no way." Daniel shook, his head slowly. "There is always a way," he said. Then he pulled the last charge from his pack, a small device, not enough to break the earth, but enough to burn a path. He handed it to her. Her eyes widened in shock. "No, you cannot. You are too weak." Daniel's voice grew quiet, but steady. "This is not my end. Not yet. But if I fall here, you run. Promise me you run." Lyra's throat tightened. Her tears blurred her sight. She wanted to refuse to fight him, but his eyes held her still. She saw not only a soldier, but a father. A man who had lost everything, yet still gave everything. She nodded slowly. "I promise," she whispered. Her voice broke. But the vow was true. Daniel set the charge. The ground shook with fire. The soldiers scattered in confusion. "Now," he shouted. They ran, their feet pounding against the snow. Bullets cracked past them, sparks flew. But the fire bought them seconds, seconds that meant life. They broke through the line, into the trees. The forest swallowed them in darkness. The lights of the city faded behind. Only shadows and silence remained. At last, when their legs could carry no more, Daniel collapsed against a tree. His breath came heavy, his wounds bleeding. Lyra dropped beside him, panic filling her chest. "No, stay with me," she cried. Pressing her hands to his wounds, her daughter crawled closer, her small hand resting on Daniel's. "Papa," she whispered softly. Daniel froze. The word hit him deeper than any wound. His eyes closed for a moment, his breath shaking. When he opened them again, his gaze was softer than ever. He looked at Lyra. "She sees me as father," he whispered. "Then I will be, until my last breath." Lyra's tears flowed freely. She pressed her forehead to his, her voice breaking. "You will not die. Not here, not like this." Daniel's hand brushed her arm, weak but steady. "If I fall," he said, "you tell her I kept my promise. You tell her one human stood and never let go." Lyra's heart shattered, but she nodded, because she knew, whether he lived or died, his vow was carved into their lives forever. The forest echoed with distant roars, a sound deeper, heavier than soldiers. The sky glowed faintly with strange fire. A new threat, greater than the last, moved in the distance. But Lyra did not look back. She held her daughter. She held Daniel's. And in that moment she swore, whatever came, they would not face it alone.